Hello, and thank you for joining me for a review of what proves to be a rather obscure little book, The 12 Maidens by Stewart Farrar. This spectacular cover, dated and magnificent, is by David Bergen, and it's a wraparound. It's got all this cute magic-y stuff at the background. And it's got cute magic-y, witchy stuff on the front, and it's a lot of fun. Now, this actually is a tricky one to classify. Apparently it was published in 1971. And if you look at the categories it's listed at, it tends to be fiction, horror, science fiction, and fantasy. I feel that some of those ratings were described by people who had never, in fact, actually read it. So, what is it about? It is so good. Got so many goodnesses in it. You start off with a woman approaching a tour late at night. It might even be midnight. And secrecy rules as a shadowy coven. Not cavern. My writing, even I can't read it. Is practicing amongst the tour, and the tour in question is the 12 Maidens of the book cover. So we all know that Stonehenge is a big thing in England, but what some people may be less aware of, at least some people in Australia are less aware of, is the fact that there are dozens of stone circles. They're everywhere. You've got all these amazing Neolithic stone circles throughout the United Kingdom, and with many interesting names. This one is called the 12 Maidens, and I don't believe it's based on an actual tour. I think it's based on generic mini tours that are throughout the United Kingdom, but I could be wrong about that. If you know better, let me know. There are 12 standing stones in a circle, like you'd see in a Stonehenge picture, and in the center there's a big flat one, the altar. Now, apparently all of the 12 standing stones have individual names, which I found fascinating, and so did some of the people in the book. But anyway, we're approaching there with an anonymous, unintroduced female at night, and when she gets there, there's a whole coven standing around stones. There's a high priest who's wearing nothing but a stag mask, and then they all become sky-clad, which is in the nud, and a ritual progresses, and we get this eerie sense of not everything is quite right about it. Now, I think that's the first scene. Let me just check to give you the hook that there's something magic-y happening. Yes, chapter 1. As she neared the summit of Maiden Tor, the woman paused and turned, looking out across the moonlit valley. Now, that's a fairly small segment, and next thing we're introduced to is the village of Bewley, which I may be mispronouncing, Bewlay, and we are told that it's this entirely normal English village. Nothing has ever much happened there, no major battles occurred, no famous people stayed there, it's too far off the beaten track to warrant a railway to it, and no highway has ever passed by, and that's the way they all like it. They don't want excitement, they want to be left alone. The nearest thing to excitement that's happening there is Bewley Towers, which is the local manor house, has been rented out to the army to use as a headquarters, and the lady who owns it, who came to her and the family, is perfectly happy to pay the rents to live in Morocco. And next thing that we're introduced to is the actual what's happening in there. So the way that we're introduced to what's happening in the tower and it's been rented out is in the pub, the local pub. And I want to visit this pub, by the way. It sounds awesome. People are chatting about what's happening up in the towers. There's some sort of secret experiment, and people are grousing about death rays and animals and all this other stuff. And so next thing that happens, we're introduced, and this is all in the first 10 pages, mind you, we're introduced to what is actually happening there. So you've got Margaret, Peter, and George are the team that are working on this biodar. The village doesn't know about it. Now we do. Biodar is an invention of a discovery of a scientist. He doesn't quite know how it works, but they've got these 3 different tubes, A, B, C, and D. And with them, you get a radar image of life. So small things like mice and shrews, such a good word, in the ground, and birds in the trees, they give you this ambient kind of green glow. But larger things like a goose or a human or a dog or a horse walking by can actually manifest on radar. So you've got this team of Margaret, Peter, and George. George is a sergeant in the army, and he's a technical sergeant, so it's his technical expertise that helps deal with this radar that they've built. Margaret and Peter are both civilian specialists that have been brought into the team by the person who discovered it, which I think was Phil Jessup. I could be wrong about that. We don't really see the person behind the scenes that much. Anyhow, we discover that the scientist who invented or discovered this, who discovered the principle and started building this biodar, recently died unexpectedly from heart attack, a little bit mysterious. Maybe it isn't a heart attack. And these guys are working on this when they discover something really, really interesting. Nearby, Maiden's Tor is like this huge black image on the screen. You can discover life up to Maiden's Tor, but this circle around it, you can't see anything. So they take it to one of the other members of the team, Carl, who's got some experience in psychic fields. Remember, this was published in 71, so we're talking about late 60s and early 70s, and he brings into friends of his who are white witches or members of a coven to see if they can deal with some things that are happening. Spoilers. I'll stop now, and in case you want to read it, because if you can get your hands on this, this is very, very well worth reading. Funny thing is, on Goodreads, it has 25 ratings and 3 reviews, so it's got almost nothing. If you go to ISFDB, it's firmly established there, and that's where I discovered that the cover artist's name was David Bergeon. Is it science fiction? I know a lot of my viewers, like myself, read a lot of science fiction. Not really. Not really. The biodar technology is definitely technology that we don't really have today, and they didn't have then. And Stewart Farrar does a fair amount of describing how it works in technological stuff, but that's only really at the start. The biodar is setting the scene. So I wouldn't really say it's science fiction. It's got just enough speculative fiction to edge it in there. Is it horror? No, it isn't horror. There's nothing horrific about it. There is a lot of witchcraft, however, which is a different story. Is it fiction? I'm going to guess it probably absolutely is. Is it fantasy? Well, it's fiction, and it's about stuff that isn't real, like the biodar. Whatever you think about witchery is aside. So fantasy, I mean, I've said fiction. What there is in this is a lot of witchy stuff. Lots of it. So you've got this Neolithic stone circle with black magic practicing within it. You've got the scientific team which slowly discovers more and more about witchery team. You've got the biological radar. You've got the army base. So you've got a little bit of army type talk there, but nothing overt. And then you get a white coven to oppose the black magic. So it's very much occult of its time. 60s and 70s. I remember a lot of the writing from that era, and it was fun. In terms of setting, it's almost Agatha Christie-like, because you're talking about this early England that seems just so... It seems more alien than Mars and a Ray Bradbury story to me. But I'm hoping to get to England before long and see if there's anything of it left. The magic scenes were what really made this book. They were brilliant. They were well written. They were matter of fact, and above all, consistent throughout to their own little magic style. Hello, familiar. Familiar dinosaur. I have a familiar dinosaur. Say hello. That'll do. So, the consistently good writing style and editing the way the story was constructed, the way that a large number of characters were kept distinct, well written, had good dialogue and interacted well. None of this felt like a book by someone who should be as unknown as I believe Stewart Farrar was. Up to page 100, this was practically a I can't put this down book. And it's a bit different from what I've been reading anyway, and I like that diversity, so that was part of it. But the small details and the consistency of the magic of the witchcraft was fascinating, and I was really, really enjoying it. Now, of those very few reviews that we find on Goodreads, which I didn't go to Goodreads till I was about halfway through this book, but by then I just absolutely had to know. Overall, it's getting 3 stars. And one of the things that people say about it is that it's cheesy, dated, and quaint. But inevitably, people say it's a lot of fun. It is heaps of fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So yes, cheesy, and it is absolutely dated. But I can't recommend it enough to people who like older style books. So here we are at about the halfway mark for me when I fell down the rabbit hole of the internet and researching it, and I found out a whole lot of stuff about Stewart Farrar. Stewart Farrar apparently was a playwright and many other things, including a brief stint with the army, when at some point he became a witch. I'm going to get the terminology really wrong, and I'm sorry about this to anyone who knows. He became part of the Wicca and New Witchcraft circle, extended whatever, of England. And with one of his wives, I believe it was the last one, Janet, he wrote many books on witchcraft that were non-fiction, but he also wrote about a dozen that were fiction and were this sort of witchcrafty, science fiction-y, fantasy fiction goodness. I now kind of want to find them all and read them. So he apparently lived in Ireland, but regularly toured the USA, giving lectures and workshops about witchy stuff. And some of his other books are Amiga, What Witches Do, and The Witch's Goddess, Serpent of Lilith, Sword of Orlais, Witch's Dozen, The Dance of Blood, Forcible Entry, The Snake on 99, and apparently he had a couple of pen names that he wrote this kind of novel as also. An exceptionally good writer. The actual writing style feels like someone who knows their craft well before producing the book. Really, really impressed me in that sense. And interestingly enough, I post on Instagram the covers of the books more or less when I start reading them. And when I posted this one, a real life friend of mine who shares an interest in historical details, Gary, popped up and said, "Oh, I've heard of them. I actually met his wife and co-author, Janet, many years ago when she was doing a book signing tour of Australia." So there we go. How does it resolve? It's got a happy ending, kinda. But the way it gets there through the different levels of witchcraft and the coven and the characters, I was just really impressed throughout. And I want to thank all my loyal supporters of my ABC reading challenge, because you guys voted for something beginning with F, Stewart Farrar. This one probably would not have reached the head of my reading list anytime soon if you hadn't voted for it. And it was a fantastic read. You guys have been doing a great job of selecting good books for me to read. So thank you very much for choosing this. I haven't given much away, but it's well worth reading. It is a good book. You should read good books. And anyone who could find this or anything, any of the other fiction, witchcraft by Stewart Farrar, read good books, read his good books, and tell me about them if you find them, or if you've ever read one. If you're one of those 5 people out in the Goodreads universe who've actually read Stewart Farrar's witchy books, tell me all about them, because so impressed. Thank you. Have a great day. Read good books. Bye.